You wake up in 1348 with a fever that shouldn't be there. By nightfall, it's worse. By morning, you can barely stand. No one knows what's happening, and no one can help you. In a world without medicine, sanitation, or understanding of disease, getting sick wasn't a setback. It was often a death sentence. So how did people survive when illness could strike at any moment? Before we find out, tell me where you're watching from, and if you think you'd last here. Like and subscribe. Now, it begins. In the summer of 1348, something invisible entered England, and within months, it began to erase entire communities. It arrived through ports like Melcombe Regis, Dorset, carried unknowingly by ships from continental Europe. By the end of that year, it had reached London. What followed was not a slow outbreak, but a rapid collapse. This was the Black Death, now believed to be caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, transmitted primarily through fleas carried by rats. But in 1348, no one knew that. People only saw the effects. At its peak in London, historical estimates suggest that up to 200 people were dying each day. Across Europe, the pandemic would kill between 30% and 60% of the population, roughly 25 to 50 million people within just a few years. The symptoms were terrifying. It began with fever and exhaustion. Then came the buboes, painful swellings in the neck, armpits, or groin. These could grow to the size of eggs or larger. In many cases, death followed within 3 to 7 days. There was no treatment, no understanding, no clear pattern. Entire households vanished, streets emptied. Church bells rang so often that in some places they eventually stopped. Not because death had ended, but because there was no one left to ring them. Mass graves appeared across cities. In London, sites like East Smithfield reveal layers of bodies buried rapidly, sometimes stacked together, suggesting just how overwhelmed the system became. But perhaps the most frightening part wasn't the death itself. It was the unpredictability. One day you were alive, the next you were not. And even if you survived this wave, it didn't mean you were safe, because disease was never just one thing. Long before the Black Death, and long after it faded, medieval life was shaped by illnesses that never truly disappeared. These weren't dramatic, fast-moving plagues. They were slower, quieter, and just as deadly over time. One of the most widespread was tuberculosis, often called consumption. It spread through the air, especially in crowded, poorly ventilated spaces, exactly the kind of environments most people lived in. Victims could survive for months or even years, slowly weakening, coughing, and fading. Then there was malaria, present in parts of medieval England, particularly in marshy regions like the Fenlands. Known historically as ague, it caused recurring fevers, chills, and exhaustion. It didn't always kill quickly, but it wore people down. Infections were everywhere. A small cut could become life-threatening. Without antiseptics or antibiotics, bacteria entered wounds easily. Even dental problems could lead to serious complications. Nutrition played a role too. Diets low in protein and vitamins weakened immune systems. During harsh winters or poor harvests, people became even more vulnerable. And unlike the Black Death, these diseases didn't come and go. They stayed. They shaped daily life, limiting how long people could work, how strong they could be, and how long they might live. Average life expectancy in medieval Europe is often estimated around 30 to 35 years, though this is heavily influenced by high infant mortality. Still, reaching old age was far from guaranteed. You didn't need a major epidemic to die. You just needed time. But even these constant threats weren't the most immediate danger, because some of the things harming you were already on your body, right now. In the medieval world, personal hygiene was inconsistent and often misunderstood. Contrary to popular belief, people did bathe, especially in earlier centuries. But by the late 14th and 15th centuries, public bathhouses declined in many areas, partly due to associations with disease and moral concerns. Regular bathing became less common, especially among the poor. Clothing was rarely washed in the modern sense. Water access was limited, soap was expensive, and garments were often worn repeatedly. This created the perfect environment for parasites. Lice lived in hair and clothing seams. Fleas thrived in bedding and straw floors. These weren't occasional annoyances, they were constant companions. Scratching, irritation, and discomfort were part of daily life. But the problem went deeper. Internal parasites, like intestinal worms, were also widespread. These could be contracted through contaminated food or water. Symptoms ranged from mild discomfort to severe malnutrition. Medical texts from the period described treatments for worms that included herbal mixtures, but effectiveness was limited. And then there were the rats. Urban environments filled with waste and food scraps supported large rodent populations. These rats carried fleas, the same fleas that would spread the Black Death. So your body wasn't just exposed to disease. It was part of the environment that sustained it. You lived with it, slept with it, carried it with you. But even that wasn't the worst, because sometimes the danger came from the very thing you depended on to stay alive. In a world where survival depended on grain, contamination could turn a staple into a silent threat. One of the most disturbing examples was ergotism, caused by a fungus called Claviceps purpurea that infected rye and other cereals. In damp conditions, common during medieval harvest seasons, this fungus could grow unnoticed on crops. When contaminated grain was ground into flour and baked into bread, the toxin entered the body. The result was a condition known as St. Anthony's fire. Symptoms varied. Some experienced intense burning sensations in their limbs. Others suffered convulsions, hallucinations, and severe muscle spasms. In certain cases, blood flow was restricted, leading to gangrene, where fingers, toes, or entire limbs could blacken and die. To medieval observers, this wasn't a medical condition. It was something else, a curse, a punishment, a sign of divine anger. Records from across Europe describe outbreaks where entire communities were affected. Victims would seek help from religious institutions, especially the Order of St. Anthony, hoping for relief. But the true cause remained hidden. They couldn't see the fungus. They couldn't understand the toxin, so they continued to eat it. The same bread that kept them alive was slowly destroying them. And when illness struck, they turned to the only forms of treatment they had, even if those treatments made things worse. Medieval medicine was built on tradition, observation, and belief, but not on scientific understanding. The dominant theory was the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was believed to result from an imbalance among these elements. Treatment aimed to restore balance. One of the most common methods was bloodletting. Using knives or leeches, practitioners removed blood from the body, believing it would reduce excess and restore health. In some cases, this may have had minor effects, but often it weakened patients further. There were also barber surgeons who performed basic procedures like tooth extraction or wound treatment. Without anesthesia or antiseptics, these interventions were painful and risky. Herbal remedies were widely used. Some had real benefits, others did nothing or caused harm. Religion played a central role. People prayed, confessed sins, and made pilgrimages, hoping for divine intervention. But none of these approaches addressed the actual causes of disease, because those causes, bacteria, viruses, toxins, were invisible. So treatment became an attempt not just to heal the body, but to control fear. And sometimes that fear led to actions that made outbreaks worse. Gatherings, rituals, movement of people. In the end, survival wasn't about finding the right cure. It was about enduring long enough for the illness to pass, if it ever did. In the medieval world, health was not something you could rely on. It wasn't stable, it wasn't predictable, and it certainly wasn't protected. You lived in an environment where disease could come from anywhere. Your food, your water, your home, even your own body. There was no single threat. There were many layered together, constantly present. The Black Death may have been the most dramatic, But it was only part of a much larger reality. People didn't just survive one illness. They survived as long as they could, against all of them. And sometimes they didn't. What's most striking is not just how dangerous that world was, but how normal it felt to those living in it. Because when you don't know another way of life, you don't see it as extreme. You see it as ordinary. So now, imagine yourself there again. It's 1348. You feel the first signs of fever. There's no doctor who can truly help you. No medicine that can stop it. Only time and chance. Do you think you would survive in a medieval city like this? Comment your answer below. And if you want to explore more realities like this, where survival was never guaranteed, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next story.